Welcome to Craft, Design, Edit, Sleep, Repeat. I'm your host, Lisa Conway. Welcome to my world where we try to understand the business of knit and crochet design. Good morning, good afternoon, hello. It's just me today and our lovely guest, Nicky Jensen of Hand Knits and Huga. Did I say that right, Nicky?
Yeah.
I did. Okay, good. That's one of those words that's popped up over the last few years, and I never know if I'm saying it right or not. Nicky is both a designer and a tech editor, so we've got both sides of the field today, which I really am excited about. So, welcome, Nicky, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, we always start out our interviews with the same question because we really like to know, how did you get started? What caused you to decide to design, and did you design or tech edit first?
Well, I started with designing, and that was kind of how I was exposed to the world of tech editing. But I decided to start designing in 2018 when I was pregnant with my daughter. I'd been knitting my whole life since I was probably 6. And I stumbled across the Araha Knits course for designers. And I thought, wow, that looks like something I would love to do. But it was an investment. I already had a career. So I sort of put it to the side. And then when I was pregnant, because I live in Canada where they have a very generously long maternity leave benefit, I had this big chunk of time. And I thought maybe this is the time to make a go of it. It was an excellent course. Unfortunately, I don't think it's running anymore. But that was how I got exposed to the world of tech editing, because she recommends in her course that if you're designing, you need to get your work tech edited. And I just found that by tech editing, in addition to designing, I could get my eyes on so many more patterns in a shorter amount of time and learn about different construction and grading methods much more quickly than if I was just going from square one at my own design each time.
Wonderful. That's interesting. So you kind of started both at the same time.
Just about, yeah. I think I had published 2 or 3 patterns, and then I ended up deciding to take Jolie Kelly's tech editor course.
I've heard really good things about Jolie's class. Now, I didn't take that one. I went through the TKGA,
Hmm.
but I have heard really good things. And just for people listening, that class now is under the Tech Editor Hub.
Hmm.
Um, Jolie still participates with some of the classes on occasion, but it's different owners at this point. So it is still out there. I will have links.
Hmm.
Um, so when you started designing, did you have a specific person in mind that you were designing for?
I do design a lot for my daughter. It's much faster and more affordable to knit for a tiny person than it is for myself. Um, Although she grows out of things so quickly. But I really enjoy making the small, the tiny sweaters. And I also like to do the adult size and the matching kids size. That's a lot of fun.
That adds to the grading process a lot, though, doesn't it?
I was going to say that too. It really helps stretch my grading muscles because obviously the body proportions are so different on a child's body versus an adult's body.
Yeah. So is that who you knit for most of the time, is your daughter, or do you knit for others as well?
I do knit a lot for my daughter. If I'm doing a design, say for a magazine, usually they wanted adult sizes, so I'll either use myself as the model or another adult that I can get my hands on their measurements, I guess. I occasionally, very rarely, do commissions. I'm working on a men's sweater right now that a friend asked me to knit for him. So
Okay. And how many patterns have you published so far?
I had to look this up. I've published 20 patterns between self published magazines and one in a print book.
That's not bad. Let's see. That's what, not a little over 4 years?
Yeah,
That's a pretty good average of 5 a year. That's not bad.
I was surprised actually.
You're doing better than me.
I think I think in the beginning I was pushing a lot more. I'd see designers putting out a pattern every month and I was like, "Oh my gosh, how can I keep up with that?" And now it's a more casual pace for sure, and I have several patterns that are close to completion but not published yet. I'm actually hoping to put them into a collection and publish them all together, perhaps a book. So it's
Wonderful.
coming out a little bit slower now, but that's okay.
That's okay. That's right. That's okay. What is your favorite type of pattern to edit?
Well, I mean, just about anything. If it's not something that I particularly enjoy, that means it's probably good practice, like short rows and socks, for example. Not my favorite. Heel turns are the thing that I always have to just draw it out on paper. I have a spreadsheet for it now, but I still end up drawing it out. Um, so that's the opposite of the question you asked. That's my least favorite, but I still like the practice. I have a few designers I work with who are doing some really like out of the box things in terms of construction, and I always find them so much fun to work with. Um, like Paul Hazemeyer is a designer who I work with. He does a lot of men's and unisex sweaters, and he does he's got such a unique style. You just have to look and see. Um, it's really cool working with him, and also the little wolf knits. She's always doing just not your average sweater. There's just really fun shaping, and it always really stretches both of us to get the grading figured out on those ones.
You do a lot of grading, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, I've gotten quite a few. Since I started offering grading to clients, I've found that quite a few of my clients come to me specifically because I can do grading as well.
Gotcha. That's great. And when you say out of the box, what do you mean? What types of constructions are you seeing? Because I'm seeing a lot of really unique methods of putting things together lately. What types of out of the box things are you seeing out there that you think is really unique and is stretching those muscles?
Yeah, well, with Brianna Lupino, the little wolf girl, or the little wolf knits, she she's been doing like single shoulder, so lots of short row shaping across the front to get from the full bust measurement down to just a one shoulder strap, and that really stretched us figuring out those short rows and figuring out where the strap needs to land in relation to the front body. Um, the one I was working on with Paul Hazemeyer, it was, I think, the sweater was knit um, l- length, like side to side, and then the collar was picked up, and it was a V-neck shaped collar, but then he picked up short rows to turn it into like a mock neck, and it was just like,
Interesting. I will
yeah.
have to what we should do is link these designers, in the show notes so that people can take a look because I know that finding unique constructions is one of the things that I enjoy the most, and I'm
Me
sure our
too.
listeners do as well.
Yeah, I
Plus, it's
think.
really, really inspiring to see
Mhm.
these different things.
Absolutely. I believe Paul works as a costumer, and so he does a lot of sewing, and so he just brings a very different um, point of view to kind of transferring what he does in his sewing work to making knitting patterns. So that's what I guess I mean when I say out of the box. It's a totally different way of looking at construction.
I have a friend who comes from that world as well, and his views on knitting always amaze me because he thinks of things that would just even as a knitter of over 45 years, I wouldn't have thought of it right up front. And so that's I think it is. It's coming from that other background. Um, he actually was a professional corseteer for a while.
Oh
I
wow.
mean, totally amazing. So his view of how the body goes together and how the garment lays on the body gives
Hmm.
him a different perspective, I think. So yeah,
Hmm.
I get that. I get that completely.
Yeah. So those are always really fun designs to have come across my desk, whether I'm grading them or just editing.
Yeah, I'm sure. And we've talked about the fact that you do editing and grading. Are there any other services you provide under your tech editing heading that
Um, y- yeah, I occasionally will do accessible formatting. Um, I learned about this from Renee Van Hoy. There are a lot of really simple formatting changes that you can make to a document um, to make it possible for someone with visual impairments to use it more easily. So occasionally a client will ask me to format their pattern, and then they can put it on Ravelry with the low vision accessible tag, and visually impaired crafters will be able to find it.
let's talk about that more because unfortunately I've been unable to get Renee here. What types of things can designers do to help make their patterns more accessible?
It can be quite often what I see is they'll make a separate document for their low vision accessible version, and it'll just be plain text, black Arial, large font helps, like 22 point or larger. And if you wanted to make it screen reader accessible, for example, you could take out abbreviations and things like that so that it when someone is listening to the text being read out, it's more understandable. And I can certainly provide a link to an article that I wrote about this that has all of the all of the very simple changes that you can make to your pattern to make it more accessible.
That would be excellent. I'm sure our listeners would appreciate that greatly. Uh, just had a big discussion yesterday on accessibility and um, a silly little thing, a pattern for leg warmers that the designer had said, don't forget to make your second one. And then he realized that that was assuming they needed a second one.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point.
I mean, we do it with socks, mittens, all of those things. And then another person in the group was saying, yeah, she had made a special pair of gloves for her mother, who as a child lost the tip of one finger. And so every pair of gloves she ever bought, that that finger on the glove would flop.
Mm,
So she made the gloves to the length of the fingers specific, and then the gloves fit so well that it's the one knitted gift she's given her mother that she's worn over and over and over again because they really fit, and it's the only pair of gloves that ever did. So little things like that can make a big difference. But accessibility for our low vision is something that I feel very strongly about.
Me
In
too.
it's I think it's I have a husband with glaucoma, and so it's something that has been brought to the forefront in my life. I have a
Mhm.
dear friend that has multiple things happening that is causing severe vision loss. And so it's that was when I really got interested in the low vision patterns because of course my husband doesn't knit, so he could care less, but other things he does that may at some point be impacted. Yeah, so it's kind of a big deal. I think it's really good that
Absolutely.
you offer that service, and I didn't know anything else.
Um, yeah, no, that's
That's okay.
those are the services that I typically provide. I've done other things like putting patterns into a layout for one of my clients and things like that, but those are the main things.
Right.
And certainly the
Um,
things that I'm most interested in, especially
gotcha.
the
I I personally offer schematics
oh yeah,
for clients. So there's various things that tech editors do. So look carefully at their websites because they'll list all of the services they can provide, and maybe one tech editor offers all the services or all but one of the services that you really would like to see, but another one only offers one or two. So make sure you look at those things when you're looking for your editor because that's a big part of that relationship.
absolutely.
So the next question was Denise's absolute favorite. Where did your username handle come from? How did you come up with Hand Knits and Huga?
I get this question a lot because it is a very unusual word. Hygge is a Danish word, and it kind of became a trendy thing a few years ago. But it roughly refers to an atmosphere of coziness. My husband's family comes from Denmark, and when I learned about Hygge, I just thought, oh, what a perfect sort of philosophy for making the most of, our winters in Canada, and I'm sure you have similar terrible actually, your winters in Alaska sound a lot worse.
Well,
I
it
mean,
depends about where you are at in Canada.
I'm close to Niagara Falls. Buffalo is, 2 hours away from my home, so it is kind of a snowbelt region. It can be pretty wild, but from what I've heard from you, Alaska sounds even more wild. Um,
The last couple years have been,
yeah.
like our massive windstorm last January, and we had another one right before Christmas that was pretty bad.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
we got hit with a bad storm right before Christmas this year too. Um, so when I guess Hygge kind of helps insulate yourself from that because the worse the weather is outside, the more you can kind of cozy up with a blanket and look outside and go, "Ooh, I'm so happy I'm in here with my knitting and my hot chocolate," and that's what Hygge is about.
right, right. So that's
Mhm.
how you came up with it. And having that Danish, connection with your husband and his family probably helped too.
Mhm.
Do you knit other people's designs still or, and if you do, why or why not?
Yes, absolutely, I do. I mostly end up knitting my own designs, but I do often knit other people's designs as well because I learn so much. I learn a new bind off or a new cast on, or um, I learn that I make assumptions about patterns based on the way I think I would do it, and then things come out differently than I expected because I'm not the one who wrote it. Like, for example, I recently knit a cardigan and I was expecting the sleeve ease to be kind of proportional to the amount of chest ease that I chose, but I didn't check and the sleeves came out quite a lot skinnier than I was expecting. And that was my fault for making the assumption instead of checking. But
That's where those schematics, when you're knitting something that requires sizing, make sure you look at the schematic and check the size that you're going for to make sure all of those measurements do work for you.
especially if it's steeked.
Oh dear, you didn't steak it before you figured it out, did you?
I sure did. There's no going back. I got skinny sleeves.
Oh, no.
It's okay. It's okay. It's not
Does it
ideal,
still
but it's
fit?
okay. I think, yeah, not the way that I hoped, but yes, it better. It's gonna have to.
Anything you can do in the blocking to
Pretty much. Yeah, I blocked those sleeves hard.
Um, do you have a favorite designer that you
Do I
like to
have
work off of, or
well, I wasn't expecting this question, Lisa.
No, I know, I threw that see, I should have warned you up front. I've got the list, but then I always find other things.
Well, the pattern that I've been going back to the most, I've knit it 3 times, is, Maxim Cyr, The Snuggle is Real. I love all his designs. I want to cast on all his designs, but I've made The Snuggle is Real for 3 of my relatives, and it's just such a it's a fun make, and it's a very, very cozy cowl, and I love it.
Yeah. Is it a reasonably fast make too?
Yeah, it's double layered. You knit the outside and then you knit the inside layer. So the stockinette for the inside layer is kind of like, oh, I'm still doing stockinette. But but the outside with the textured slip stitch pattern is a lot of fun. It's worth it.
Maybe you could just maybe you could just, modify the inside layer to have some sort of patterning so it's reversible, and that would make it more fun.
Yeah, I did the third one that I made, I did it with like a like a spiral stripe on the inside, so that was at least a little bit of something, and I also shrunk it down for my daughter, which I love to do, and, I didn't put a lining on hers because I know she runs hot, so that was really quick.
Gotcha. That's an interesting comment you just made about your daughter. She's one of those that people that has a warm body temperature. Not all of us
Mhm.
do. I'm literally sitting here in a wearable blanket with a blanket wrapped around my legs, trying to stay warm.
Yes, me too. I'm wearing many layers, sweaters, and shawls to,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I guess kids,
Um,
they're just always moving, so they stay warm.
where do you find inspiration for your designs? This is something that reaches out to our beginning designers. Where do you look for inspiration?
Quite often, I would say the majority of the time, it's the yarn. I'll pick up a yarn and it sounds really strange, but sometimes it just tells me what it wants to be.
I
Um,
think all knitters have experienced that at least once in their knitting career.
right? That's what I thought. See, I know it sounds weird to anyone who's not a knitter, but knitters know. The yarn knows what it wants to be sometimes. And lately, it's been kind of uh I don't want to say nature, that sounds really vague, but sometimes landscapes, sometimes animals. I spent a lot of time during the pandemic just looking at my bird feeder. So the collection that I'm working on is bird inspired. So that will
Oh,
be
that sounds intriguing. I can't wait to see them. You see, I get the
yeah.
joy of tech editing a good many of Nikki's patterns, so I get to see them kind of up front.
Yep, they're coming. They're on their way.
Well, am here for you when you are ready. So, I lost my train of thought. I apologize. Like Tiffany used to say, join the crazy train or the chaos train. Have you ever felt like the designing or tech editing just wasn't worth what you were having to put into it? Did you ever feel like it was time to quit?
S- Not tech editing. Designing, I think I actually really very quickly came to a point where I realized that if I wanted to be a designer, I'd have to invest a lot more in marketing or learning how to market in order to get my designs seen. And that is not something that comes naturally to me. I see some designers who really know how to hustle on social media or who've invested in beautiful photography and they're growing an amazing business. But at the time that I started designing, I was coming through like, you know, the newborn phase with my daughter and some difficult postpartum. And I just couldn't see myself, dancing on camera for Instagram. So, um, tech editing ended up being a better business for me to grow at my own speed.
So, even though you continue to design, the tech editing is your primary at
Yeah.
this point. Yeah.
Yeah, ended up being, although I do sell my patterns and I sell to magazines and things like that, it does sort of feel more like a hobby.
Yeah. I totally get that because I actually started tech editing first, and it was that that led me to do the first design.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so I've got a couple of things sitting there. Matter of fact, I've got a couple that should have been released before Christmas, but here we are.
Mhm.
Um, and designing never really was in my thought process. It was literally Denise, my former partner here at the podcast, that talked me into doing that first design.
Well, why
So,
not? If you're a tech editor, you know how a pattern is written, so
yeah,
why not
yeah,
write one?
yeah. So, but I find it much more challenging to make my visions come to life
Hmm.
in the designing area. It's much harder for me. So, I'll never be a big designer.
Mhm.
That's okay. I don't mind.
Mhm.
And I love the tech editing, so, you know, that's where we sit.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. For me, it's I do really enjoy the process of designing. It just didn't it didn't feel like it was as easy to find people to purchase those patterns as it was to find people who wanted me to tech edit for them. And honestly, I don't always know where I get these client referrals from, but I'm always very happy to get them. I think some of them have been a few of my clients are YouTubers, and they must have mentioned that they were working with me, and that's how people found me. Um, but yeah, the whole singing and dancing on Instagram thing, it's like, is this really how you build a business? Is this the only way?
yeah, I've been struggling with that same thing. I'm obviously not a big poster on Instagram, um, but I mean, 90 I think if you look through my Instagram, probably 95% are the podcast,
Mm,
you know?
mhm,
Um, letting people know that the next episode is there, what the episode is kind of about, and hoping that they come and listen. Because to be honest, totally honest, the podcast has become a really important part of what I want to do
mhm,
and helping designers that or people who think they want to design figure out those first steps. And I've been taking this last couple of months really thinking about that because while I was down, while I was ill, um, and couldn't participate, the podcast kind of strayed a little bit away from that. And I
mhm,
really am focusing on bringing it back to that. My goal is to be here for designers, people who want to build their businesses. And I'm still really hoping to find a good marketer to bring on.
Mhm.
That because that's I'm the same. I'm not a natural marketer. I really am
Mhm.
not. Um, I honestly believe my kid does a better job of it than I do. Maybe I should be hiring her.
There you go. There you go. Well, let me know how it
She
works out because 'cause I'm in the market for one as well.
well, she is my natural model too.
Mhm.
If you look at my first pattern, um, I asked her, "Hey, will you model this for me?" And if you look at her, she just fell into it. But I think that's her dancer side.
Mm,
She's
mhm.
a dancer, so yeah. So if you think of any tips for marketing, please shoot them our way. We'd
Yes.
love to hear what you guys have to say on this. So you talked about the group of designs that you're working on. What else is waiting in the wings?
Um,
Or tell us more about the designs.
yeah, well, I have published one bird themed design already. So anybody who's looking for sort of a sneak peek, it was published over the summer in Digits and Threads magazine, which is a Canadian online magazine for all sorts of fiber crafts. And so it's a blue jay inspired colorwork yoke, and there's, yeah, several more like that coming. I think I've got four more samples finished and several more in various stages of the process.
Wonderful.
So,
I'm familiar with digits and threads, but I didn't catch the release, so I'll have to go back and look. I also want to point out that I saw your cinnamon hearts in the email from Knitpicks.
yes, me too. I was like, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And I guess I better make an Instagram post about it now.
I recommend you do because I was real excited yesterday when I saw that. It was like, "Yay, Nikki!"
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. Oh,
Working with those yarn producers is really helpful for getting your name out there, so
yeah, and Knitpicks has been really great to work with. It's pretty easy to get involved in their independent designer program. So if any budding designers starting out are looking for kind of where to start, you can submit your idea to Knitpicks, and they'll supply the yarn that you need, and they'll help with the marketing too, which is a really big help.
yes, yes. So Knitpicks is a great company. I've used a lot of their yarns over the years, and they're all good quality yarns for not really horrendous prices. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
I've also We Crochet is, I think, the same company.
it
So
is.
I've designed a 1 or 2, crochet summer tops with their yarn. Because for some reason, I find that in the summer, I gravitate toward crochet and cotton and those things.
I didn't realize you designed in both. That now see, that's you should have stuck that in there somewhere.
Ah, I just did.
So for our crocheters out there, that's good to know. I
Yeah.
hadn't realized that you did both. So,
Mhm.
anything else coming up? Any Are you working on any other collaborations?
Am I working on any other collaborations? Not Not really right now. It's mostly just been my daughter started school this year, so my focus this year was growing the ticketing business because now I've got all this additional. I used to only be able to work, like 8 hours a week probably, and now all of a sudden I've got 20. So mostly I've been growing the ticketing business when she's not at home sick, which is almost all the time.
Kindergartners.
So
Yeah,
yes, so
yeah,
best laid plans, right? So
yeah.
am in a bit of a transitionary period is, long story short.
You know, every year is a transitionary period until your kids get old enough to do all of the stuff by themselves. Like
Yeah,
my kids are now old enough that they do the cooking.
that's great.
Thank God they've been around to do all of the cleaning
Oh, wow.
because for nearly 6 months have not been able to do much of anything in either of those 2 realms.
Right.
Um, they do between my husband and the kids, they do the laundry.
That's great.
It's been a lifesaver these last few months, believe me.
Absolutely.
But, they can get their own meals. They can get to and from the places they need to go. As a matter of fact, t to throw this in, I can't drive right now.
Oh, boy.
So, for the last 6 months, I've been relying on my kids, even more than my husband, to take me everywhere I need to go, all my doctor's appointments, all my physical therapy appointments, everything. And it's usually my 16-year-old that does most of it.
Well, that's kind of a win-win. They get the practice driving, and you get where you need to go.
It's probably the one thing I hate the most. Anyway, so just understand, transition periods don't end until they're about, maybe 14, 15-ish,
Mhm.
when you've started teaching them when they can truly be independent in the kitchen.
Mhm.
Once they can be independent in the kitchen, then you're good to go. But, when you still have to keep an eye on things while they're in the kitchen, yeah. So just
Well
expect it to continue to go.
well, at this point, after being at home with her 24/7 for the last 4 years, like, for her to go somewhere else for 5 hours a day, it's like, "This is amazing."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, next big question is, what advice would you give to the designer or tech editor that wants to get started?
Well, the, the advice that I have for budding designers would definitely be use a tech editor. It I know that it can seem appealing to let test knitters help you work out the kinks in your patterns, especially when you're getting started. But it's not it's not really fair, especially if there end up being grading concerns, because the tester spends a lot more time working the pattern than it would take a tech editor to edit it, and they're not usually getting compensated for doing that. But if you have financial concerns, you can always go on the Tech Editor Hub group and see if you can find a newbie tech editor who's offering their services in exchange for a testimonial. And that can be a great way for both of you to get started.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
um, and other than that, I would say just understanding that tech editing and professional grading can take several passes and lots of back and forth. It sounds cliche, but communicating with your editor or your grader is so important, and remembering that you're on the same team. Um, I had, unfortunately, I had a situation where the designer um, didn't send me back her corrections before sending the pattern to her testers, and then got upset with me when the testers found mistakes that hadn't been corrected yet. And I just thought, oh, that's something that could have so easily been avoided if the steps had been followed. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
I totally agree with all of that. For one thing, a tech editor looks at different things than a tester does.
Hmm.
They're they're both incredibly important parts of the process. I recently edited a pattern that is a technique that is so new in many ways that I the cast on directions made sense to me. It seemed like it would work. I didn't actually pick up the needles and try it, and I probably should have, but knowing she had a really good tester in her mix that this was going to next, I didn't really think it necessary to do that, and that tester did in fact find an error in the way she'd written the cast on.
Mhm.
And so they're both really important parts. I was looking at, is it readable? Is it consistent? Does she have the grammar correct? Does she have the right periods and commas and colons and those kinds of things, where the tester was actually picking up the needles and doing the motions. And because that tester was familiar with the technique to begin with, he immediately spotted the error in the cast on.
Mhm.
And it was like perfect. It was the perfect team for all of us to be part of that team and to be communicating. I loved being part of that test because we could communicate, okay, well, what about this? If it was done this way or said this way, would that
Mhm.
make more sense? That was really exciting. So I'd like to actually get more involved in my designers' test knits, even if
Mhm.
it's just as um, a watcher, sitting back and watching the conversation and not really participating much. I think there's value to that. So I'm
Mhm.
hoping to add that aspect more as I move forward this year.
Yeah, absolutely. That collaboration piece is probably my favorite thing about being a tech editor
Yeah,
is, solving those problems together.
right.
And certainly I agree with you. There are definitely things that are just more obvious when it's on the needles. Um, and I do edit some crochet as well. I feel like knitting is like my mother tongue and crochet is like my second language. So quite often when I'm editing crochet, I will end up picking up a hook and making sure that, yeah, I'm getting it. That makes sense.
Right. I have actually edited 2 crochet patterns, one of which never made it to publication. There were so many problems with the pattern that basically the designer just really didn't know how to write things down, and I wasn't good enough at crochet, and I kept trying to encourage that designer to work with another more experienced crochet editor.
Mhm.
It it the pattern went through, like, 4 rewrites, and every single time it completely changed what was happening.
Oh boy.
It was but I I've not made the leap into offering crochet editing. I do crochet, yes, but I've never, ever crocheted anything with shape,
Mm.
right? I've never crocheted a garment. So the shaping parts would be completely foreign language to me, and I don't feel I offer the best service for that.
Right.
I don't feel like I could be the best person.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. It's kind of like the out of the box thinking again because when you look at a pattern that's written by somebody who is a crocheter and you look at I don't know, when I look at my own patterns, I guess as my own, you know, biggest critic, I think I feel like I really looked at this from a knitter's perspective and then put it into crochet stitches and I think that that can work, but it's limited because crocheting can be so much more free form. It doesn't really have to necessarily stick to the rows and stick to the stitches. It can kind of go wherever it needs to. And so I think I think to be a good crochet designer and crochet editor, you have to maybe have that more free form thinking. Um, and that's why
I
it still feels like a second language to me.
yeah, yeah, and like I said, while I have crocheted for nearly as many years as I've knit, I've not done as much of it, and I have never done the detailed things within it that would lead me to be a good editor for it. So I
Mhm.
while my initial plan was to try to add crochet editing within the first year, I've realized very quickly I'm not good enough for that, and that would be a disservice to my clients. So I have Tiffany, who I automatically recommend people to. Um, Tiffany, we miss you, but yeah, I just don't think it would be a good fit for us, and I think it would be the wrong thing for me to do.
Mhm. Yeah, I think most of my crochet clients are pretty straightforward. A lot of them include really great photos of the steps to help people get through. A lot of them are YouTubers, so they'll have a video tutorial to complement the pattern. But crochet charts are just one thing. I don't know if I'll ever get the hang of like writing a crochet chart. It's so different.
Yes, I agree, especially the fact that oftentimes they have to be, like you said, freeform.
Mhm.
They don't fit into that box that knitting charts fall into. Um, it's a whole different ball game. I've
Yeah.
looked at various charting apps and, considered getting them just to play with, just to understand it better, but I still don't know that I'd be good at offering it as a service.
Yeah. Which ones do crochet charts? Which
There's a couple of apps for the iPad
Oh, okay.
that specify that are more about crochet charts than I'll have to look them up. I'll put links in the show notes, and I'll send you an email with the links or the app names because, I've looked at a couple of them and they're so intriguing.
Mhm.
I know that Stitch Fiddle also does crochet,
I've
and I
heard that. Yeah.
think that they're more the crochet side allows for the more free form, like the circles and things,
Okay.
because s cro much of crochet ends up going from the center out.
Mhm. Yeah, I've used Stitch Fiddle a little bit, and I'll have to look at that more and try to learn how to do it because I don't like not being able to say, "Oh yeah, I I don't want to say I can't."
It's not a matter of I can't, it's a matter of am I the best fit?
Mhm.
And I look at it okay, age wisdom here, right? We always wanna learn new things, so it's great to stretch ourselves, but you reach a point in your life when you realize that this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at, and it's okay that there's something I'm not good at,
Mhm.
right? And if it's if I'm not as good I may be okay at it, but I'm not as good at it. Is it the right thing for me to do to try to offer that for payment when I'm not good at it, right?
Mhm.
When I'm not when it's not my strength, because
Right.
that we all have strengths and weaknesses no matter what we're doing, and we get more and more familiar with what those strengths and weaknesses are as we get older. And there comes a point where you just say to yourself, "You know what? That's a weakness. I can only work on it to this level of strength, and that's okay.
Mhm.
It's fine that I'm not perfect at that." You know? So, it's just a matter of recognizing that, yeah, it's okay to let that sit where it's at because then you can focus over here on getting that much better at what your strengths are.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so for our new people, take time to learn what your strengths are. That's okay too, because maybe your strength is not a yoke sweater. Maybe your strength is the accessories, the socks, the mittens, the scarves, the cowls. I've got one designer that I know that has never designed a garment, never will design a garment, knows that's not their thing,
Mhm.
you know. That's okay,
Mhm.
and we all have to at some point in our lives recognize this is my strength, this is my weakness. Focus on the strength. Make the strength overcome the weakness. Allow the strength to overcome the weakness. Boy, did I get philosophical there.
But that was good though. That was a really good answer to the question of, for new designers, but also new tech editors, finding what you're good at and what's your strength and what you have to offer. Um, it, that's where the clients will come from.
Right, exactly, because the clients that you really develop those wonderful relationships with, and as an editor, I will tell you, develop a relationship with your editor or your designer because that is the key. It like you've used the word a couple of times. It's a team.
Mhm.
We don't work in a vacuum. We work together to make it the best. And as an editor, my goal is to help you have a product that people absolutely love and will tell their friends about.
Mhm.
Because as much as you can market, the ones that are successful are the ones that the word spreads.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just that simple. So, last but not least, Nikki, how can our listeners find you if they want to hire you or buy your patterns?
I am on Instagram, Ravelry, and Facebook at Hand Knits and Hygge. That's Hygge is spelled Hyggge. And I'm also at handknitsandhygge.com.
Wonderful. We'll make sure those are all listed in our show notes for you folks. Nikki, I want to thank you for spending this time with me. It's a little odd for me having just me on this side of the screen,
Mhm.
but we'll get there. We'll get there. I'll learn to talk to myself for one episode a month.
Oh, well, invite me back anytime you're lonely.
Oh, that's wonderful. I appreciate that. Thanks, Nikki. You have a great day. Go take care of that little sick darling of yours.
Thank you so much. You too.
Check back next time when I talk about the tools tech editors and designers use. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen, and join the conversation in our Ravelry or Facebook groups. For show notes or knit tech editing and related services, please visit my website at arcticedits.com.